Welcome everyone to IMG Research Academy. IMG Research Academy is a collection of medical professionals that are interested in understanding the research process. We are cut across everywhere in the globe, from Australia to Africa, from Africa cut across to Canada, US, Europe. Our main goal is to see how we can demystify clinical research and make patient management outcomes better. Today, we have a number of us that are going to face other interview processes, and we're trying to look at how to go through an interview, a research interview, either a doctoral interview, professorial interview, or your residency interviews, fellowship interviews, and the rest. One of the major things, the first thing that you should understand before going into such talks with your interviewer or your program directors is you have to understand research process. Research process. If you don't understand research process, they may ask you any question along the line of research process and to throw you off. So today I'm going to take my time to describe what is a research process, how do you go through the research process, what does it entail? What does the research process entail? And if you have a basic understanding of these processes, you should be able to answer any question that will come across you in terms of methodology, in terms of semantics, in terms of the nuances of clinical research. The first thing that you do when you want to do clinical research, one of the first things that you do when you want to do clinical research is to conceptualize, to think about the idea. And, you know, when I hear people ask these questions, what was your role in clinical research? Don't forget that conceptualization alone, like we are always here in this Zoom meeting, conceptualizing ideas upon ideas upon ideas every day. That is participation. That is one of the bedrock of participation. If you Google the ICJME guidelines for authorship of a paper, conceptualization is the very first thing that comes into play. I mean, you can't create a project without conceptualizing, thinking about it. What am I going to do? How do I do it? Most of the time you think about it alone. Other times you think about it in groups. Like we do in IMG Research Academy, we think about it in group. It might be conceptualizing on this particular project, or it might be conceptualizing on future projects, or it might be conceptualizing on, you know, the next step, or the next step, or the next step. And conceptualization may come by way of being active thinking. So I sit down somewhere, I block my time, like Isaac Newton. I take my book and my pen, I begin to go through the internet or through my archival memories, and I begin to conceptualize what is it that I want to do. That is one way to do it actively. Another way to do it is, okay, this is also one way to do it. We're here together actively conceptualizing ideas. Another way to do it is passively. You could do it passively. You could just be walking by the street and then you see a scorpion bite and you wonder, why did the scorpion choose to bite me on the lateral part of my leg? Can I do a study to find out if scorpions bite on the lateral part of the legs? And then what is the implication? So that means if a scorpion is coming, I turn my leg to the medial part, it's not going to sting me. That is an idea. It could come when you're managing your patients. Why did this patient respond to olanzapine 20 milligram and this other patient did not respond to olanzapine 20 milligram? Oh, wait a minute. Are there people that respond to olanzapine? Could there be genetic variation? Could it be matter of adherence? Could it be timing of medication? Could it be drug-drug interaction? And then you go back and you do a case report, and then you do a literature review to see the number of people that react to or that have responded to olanzapine, and then you try to construct a prospective study. So it comes in various ways. It could also come by mere suggestion. Conceptualization could come by Dr. Edward calling Dr. Toro. Hey, Dr. Toro, I have this great idea. And then I sell my idea to you. And then we both run with that idea, right? So that's a major part of conceptualization. And what do you conceptualize? You can't conceptualize out of thin air, right? You have to conceptualize on areas, on segments, on places, or on things, on focus, or specialties that you love. You notice that many of the things that we write, you do well if you really like them. If you're In psychiatry, most of your thought will be revolving around how you're going to make your psychiatric processes, understanding, and outputs better. If you're a pediatrician, you're going to like Dr. All the pediatricians in the group, you're going to be thinking of how you can better the pediatric ward, how you can Dr. AB and the rest, how you can better your pediatric ward, and so forth and so forth. If you're interested in the bench research, if you're interested in oncology, you find out that we advise you from IMG research to focus on those areas that you are very interested in. And that's one of the things that we talk about when we are grouping people, whether into the consulting category or into the free categories, to focus on areas that trigger your interest, so that it will be easy for you to understand. It will be easy for you to move forward and do them. So conceptualization it's one of the first steps, one of the principal steps in clinical research. Now, having conceptualized an idea, let's give an example. I thought, let's give an example of a project that we did. Same project, colorectal cancer screening in people with depression and anxiety. And I have an anecdotal stand that, hey, people that have anxiety and depression, they really don't, I think because of the anxiety and depression, they don't want to do colonoscopy because they are anxious and they're depressed and they don't want to like put body. That's anecdotal, right? I really want to find out what is the pattern and trend in the past, right? So you have to, at this point, next thing to do is to create a research question or an objective of now what you want to do. In this particular case, report or this particular publication that we're talking about, our thought process was, our objective was to find out, right? To find out, and you could find out a lot of things. Are you finding out a trend? What is the frequency? What is the association? What is the outcome? What is the pattern? What is, there's thousands of objectives to create to find out. And whatever objective that I decide to create is my objective, right? That is my research. It is not subject to, is it the perfect objective? Is it the most brilliant objective? As at that particular point in time, I just want to solve that problem, and that becomes my research question or my objective. The research question will be, is the rate of colorectal cancer screening more than the normal population or less than the normal population, right? That's the research question. The research objective is I want to find out. The objective is to determine the rate of colorectal cancer screening. So after conceptualization, and then you go to the next step of creating an objective, you have to actually really write an objective out or write your research question. Now, when you must have conceptualized this beautiful plan that you want to do or this beautiful project that you want to do, and then you have an objective, the next thing is, how do I even bring this whole thing in my head? How do I bring them into life? That is where you go into, what is the research plan? What is my plan? How do I get my data? Do I want to look retrospectively? Do I want to have a snapshot, cross-sectional snapshot of what is happening now to give me the answers to answer my question? Or do I want to look into the future, right? And that will determine where you're going to get your data from. If you're doing a prospective study, so you have to design a study that will now look at colorectal cancers in depression patients moving forward over 5 years. Probably collect data as they do or as they don't do colonoscopy. And then you analyze the data in 5 years time. Or you want to do a cross-sectional study right now. What is the rate today? So all the patients in clinic across the US today, right today, I want to get my answers. And how do I do it? Either I do it by design of questions, or I do it by active clinical research, trying to recruit people that will give us answers to what we want. So that is the next step. So I talked about conceptualization. I moved into designing your research objective and your research questions. And now you are trying to get a plan. How do I execute this? And how do I get my data? For this particular colorectal cancer screening in depression and anxiety, we actually looked retrospectively. We looked at retrospective data, right? And so we didn't have the time to look prospectively. We didn't have the tools to go cross-sectional. So, but we have access to data that will give us what has happened over the past 10 years on these people, right? Because you have to know the past to be able to predict the future. In many of these research things, we usually advise people to start from the back and then move forward, right? Except you're, a guru or you've been doing it, actively. So data, we had access to data. Now, as a researcher in IMG Research Academy, we want you to know that data exists and exists abundantly everywhere. The question may come up in your everyday dealing, in your job prospects. Your everyday dealing, your job prospects, or your interviews, or your workplace. How did you get data? Like they asked Dr. Obiamaka in this, how did you get data? Proficiently, you should be able to answer those questions. How do people get data in research? We've talked about prospective data collection. We've talked about cross-sectional. A very common one is retrospective data collection, right? Getting data from the past. And it all depends on what kind of data that we're talking about. Now we're talking about clinical research, right? We're not talking about just research in general or engineering research or human psychology research. Even human psychology research is part of clinical research. We're talking about clinical research. Now, in the US, in every country, in every state, in Canada, in Australia, there are readily accessible data anywhere you look around. There are data in your state where you live, health data that answers so many research questions that you want to ask or research objective, or that sets to answer them. There are hospital data. You can get data from your hospital. You could get data from your local counties and local government and local health authorities, like CDC, like FDA, like just name them, National Immunization Service. You could get data from your department. You could get data from your patient, right? You can get data. We've gone through the process of how to collect data appropriately. I wouldn't bother the house on going back to those. We have YouTube teachings and YouTube lessons on how to collect data appropriately. So you could get data from these places that I've mentioned. Now, I want to be more specific. In the US, there are huge databases that are available to the public online. One of those databases is what they call the CDC Wonder. You just type CDC Wonder. It's going to give you a huge database. Today's talk is not, I'm not going to spend time going into how to extract or how to harvest data or how to mine data from this database. But CDC Wonder is a huge database and it's absolutely free. And if you watch many of the projects that we did in IMG research, we got this data from CDC websites. We just go to CDC website. They've already made it public. The research ethics have already permitted us to access the data because it's publicly de-identified data. How do they even collect this data? What these health authorities do or what these regulatory authorities do is they either directly or indirectly, formally or informally, gather data from everybody. Your age, it's no news that your age, name, address, disease status, non-disease status, marital status, non-marital status, everything is available on the internet. You could literally Google Edwards and get everything you want to know about him. How did they get this data? Either from what I inputted somewhere, I waved away my right that my data should be accessible, either in my medical records or in the bank, or when I went for one health screening or another, and then they gather this data. Some of these other data, they send out questionnaires to people's house to actually take their consent and then ask them to fill up this data. So directly, they can send you questionnaires to your house, which I believe many of you must have received those questionnaires from these regulatory bodies asking you questions. Those questionnaires could be targeted on a particular disease group. Let's say all the people that had tuberculosis, we want to know when they came into the US. So once you're diagnosed with tuberculosis, they send you, they track you down, send you surveillance questionnaires to find out your age, name, date of birth, and all those things. And you voluntarily yield to those questionnaires. And then they keep those data in their database. Now, researchers like me and you, we now go to that database and extract that data and form research concepts and research ideas and research questionnaires and research everything that we want to do, research answers, analysis on those data that CDC and other health regulatory authorities have made available online. There's the ones that they call National Health Hints, National Institute of, can't remember the name, but I think Dr. Obiamaka mentioned it. That was where we got that data, that particular research data from, the one that we use for this colorectal cancer. So what we did is that in that hint survey, the CDC, or no, not CDC, CDC or NIH, I think it's NIH, I'm not too sure, I'll look at it again. They've already collected data from all the people that were depressed or had anxiety and how and when and the rate of when they did their colorectal cancer screenings. So what we simply did was go look at all the people that ticked on, are you depressed, clinically diagnosed, yes, 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 right? And then, did you do your colorectal cancer screening, yes or no, yes or no? When did you do it? Click, click, click. Age, sex, year of birth, date of birth, ethnicity, region, location. So many, it's a long, large spreadsheet of data. So we just clicked on the data points that we wanted to analyze, downloaded it into an Excel sheet, and then we analyzed it. Very simple thing that every researcher should know how to do and where to do it. Other databases like National Health Interview Surveys, NHIS, there's thousands of data all there. And if you've seen them if you've seen them reoccurring in most of our surveys or most of the projects that we've done. National Economic Injury and Surveillance Surveys, Surveillance Epidemiologies and End Results, that's the SEERS, is another wonderful database. National Practitioner Bank Database, NPDB database. So these are all databases and they're all accessible. Some of them are accessible. Some of them you have to pay for it annually. So, but as a research group, we were lucky enough to subscribe and we have a payment running for almost all our database, hiccups, the ones that we have to pay yearly, the ones that we have to pay monthly, the ones that we have to pay, like we buy it in batches. We could say from 2015 to 2022, and then we kind of register. We pay to register to access this data bank. Okay. So, but don't bother yourself with which ones are paid, which ones are not paid. As you begin to advance in research, you're going to figure out whether enhanced data is paid or the NEISS data is paid or the CDC one that is free. Some of them have restrictions and have trainings that you have to go through. We have these certifications in IMG Research Academy. We've done months and months of trainings to be able to obtain this data ethically and rightfully. And so these are the various databases. I've mentioned them, names of few ones. And in Canada, you also have similar databases like the Veteran Health Administration databases. US and Canada also has this Medicare, Medicaid database also that you also have to access, get access to get data for whatever research that you want to do. National Immunization Survey, I mentioned that before, where you can get your databases. And like for autopsies, those in pathology, they have national repositories where tissue banks, we have national tissue banks where tissues are stored, right? So there are national tissue banks and repositories on almost every state in the US where specific tissues are stored, what tissue it is, how it looks like, what is the sample, when was it taken, the demographics of the people that it was taken from, so many questions, the morphology, the pathophysiologies, the electron microscopy features of those tissues, if they have, the specific staining techniques, a lot of data on this tissue, on tissues. So you can write to those national tissue banks and say, hey, I need data for, let's say, for example, all African Americans on tuberculosis, on their tissue, and you have conceptualized something, and then you write something about it. So that's for data. Once you collect your data, the next step is to determine, okay, how do I analyze this data to answer my objective, right? And in IMG Research Academy, we're trying to make things very simple. Start with very simple things. Start with frequencies, frequency studies. What is the rate? What is the incidence? Then keep it simple. You see many of the projects that we've done in our group, we just kept it simple, right? We didn't go into the complexities of associations and no associations and causality and no causality, where we have to use very complex statistical techniques. So keep it simple, something that you could do with your calculator on your phone. What is the mean age of death, infant mortality death? Like one of the studies that we just submitted. We did a very simple mean frequency mode thing. That's it. And that's our project, right? That was what we wanted to do. You could also define what is the range of age, what is the range of dates, what is the range. So you create a statistical plan that you will use to analyze these data. There are several simple and complex statistical plans, right? And we've had series of classes on statistics in this. Videos are available that went into detail, when to use regression analysis models, when to use interquartile range, when to use these to determine this or to determine that or to determine that. So let's just use this very simple one, mean, median, and mode. And then you make a statistical plan. So I go back to the beginning, I conceptualize my idea, I have my research objective and my research or my research question. I figure out how to get my data. I get my data, and then I write a statistical plan on what do I want to do to achieve, to answer the research question or to address the research objective. And then I do that. Next thing is, how do I analyze this data? What tool do I use? That would be the next step. So in analyzing data, you can either choose to use Excel, you can use SPSS, and several other softwares that are available. You can just simply want to use your calculator. Or the most easiest tool that we use in analysis is simple Excel sheets. And Excel has very easy codes that you plug in this data. You already know what you're looking for, and then you click on those codes, and it's going to either graphically represent what you want to say or figuratively represent what you're trying to answer. Excel is amazing. So also other tools like SPSS, SAS, and other complex tools. But I tell people, keep things simple. Don't do something complex, because those other complex tools, you're going to pay for them. One of the, I was telling Nigerians, one of the tools that we subscribe to, we pay $300 every month to that particular tool to be able to analyze our data. $300 every month. If you're not dedicated to research, you will not be able to do that. Even though that makes our life easy, because once we plug our figures in, we just click on it, it will draw the diagram, it will analyze it for us, we just copy and we paste, right? It makes life very easy, because this is our jet age where AI has taken over. But it comes at a cost, $300 every month. And there's one that we subscribe $1,200 every year, to be able to get these data analyzed. So determine the tool that you're going to use to analyze your data, and then keep it simple, get your data, analyze it. And so now you've had your results. What is the next step? The next step is, how do I now describe my results to address my research question? Because you're now going to report it. So the next part is reporting your data, right? Reporting your research. How do I report this research? I've conceptualized it. I've done my objective. I've had all my research question. I've gotten my data. I did my data plan, got my data. I've analyzed it. Now I have a bunch of numbers before me. It may also not be numbers, because in qualitative research, you don't deal with numbers. You deal with concepts, right? So I have a bunch of concepts before me, or I have a bunch of numbers before me. What do I do next? And the next thing is to do what they call a writing plan, right? So it's part of conceptualization. Now, that's why when people say that I did not participate in this research because I did not write a chapter in it, or when they expect you to hear, oh, what role did you play? I wrote a chapter, I wrote conclusion. Those are I'll use the word very myopic, very, very intangible way of looking at the long spectrum of what we do in clinical research. If you see all I've been mentioning from beginning to the end, none of them involved writing as much as people were expecting. Oh, I wrote the conclusion, or I wrote the abstract. If you did not write the abstract, don't put your name, and all those kind of very, I'll use the word very mundane way of analyzing what we do in clinical research, right? Very childlike way of thinking, because it goes just beyond writing. That's why you see that even in the advanced settings, professors are featured as authors of papers because they played some roles that are intangible. Those roles are not even, they didn't write a particular statement, but they played so much intangible role. For example, they could criticize your writing, and then you go back and rewrite it. Like so many people have criticized my writing. I write a lot, and people say, I wrote this writing, this thing that you wrote. And that was an immense contribution, because without that person's criticism, I would have published one crap. Without that person's peer review, I would have published one nonsense. And then the person, and then I don't include the person, I'll do the person injustice if I don't. And then, or the person falls behind and say, oh, don't put my name because I did not write chapter 1 or chapter 2 or chapter 3. That means the person is very naive of what the spectrum of clinical research is all about, right? So there are so many roles, and we're going to touch on these roles at the end of these lectures, that are intangible, but they are very crucial to the ICGME guideline. A typical example of one is validating, I've forgotten how to put it, validating clinical concepts. So now that I'm writing that colorectal cancer is common in clinical, depression means A, B, C, D, E, for example. Your contribution could just simply be validating that concept. And then you look at it and say, team A, this statement is not medically correct. Or yeah, this statement is very medically correct. That's validation. So you agree to the content of that research. That's also part of contribution. I think that association you wrote the other time was not, I think it's right. That's validation, because I don't know it all. That's why I'm working as a team to know it all. So at least to be able to function in different parts of my blind site or my hand site or my blind spot will be your clear site, right? So various roles to play. Now let me come back to what I was saying before about writing a research plan. Now that I've gotten my data, my results before me, next thing for me to do is to see how to analyze this data and talk about it and report it. And there's no one acceptable universal way of reporting or presenting your data. You could decide to use the argumentative way. We are right, they are wrong. You could decide to use the collaborative way. My research collaborates with previous findings in the past, and you begin to cite, we found that the rate of colorectal cancer screening was normal, was the same compared to the normal, the rate of colorectal cancer screening in depression was the same compared to the average population, as found by John et al. In 1962, also validated by so in blah, blah, blah. So you write your research plan. So it's either you're doing a collaborative research plan, or you're doing an argumentative research plan, or you're doing a combination of both of them, or you're even doing an analytic research writing. Analytic research writing is you are trying to explain why you feel that process is, or why you feel that result is this way. What could be the factors that are affecting this result, right? So if you're a master planner, you can combine all of them in paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3. Keep your writings focused on one area, sweet, simple, and short. 3-4 paragraphs is enough. Gone are the days where you write 50 chapters or 30 chapters before it becomes a manuscript. The trick these days, or not the trick, the way we have tried to demystify it is, if you see most of our discussions are very short, 3-4, keep it very focused. Focus on one point of the result, because you find out that when you analyze your results, you have several points to talk about. We just narrow down to one point, talk about it, 1 or 2 primary objectives, talk one or two objectives, a major primary objective, address another secondary objective, and that's it. We'll write our conclusion and we go. We leave room for the other people to make comments, right? It is now left for the publishers or the peer reviewers or my professors to say, I think this research reviewed this interesting trend. Do you want to talk about it? And then we say, oh, yes, we're going to write it on another journal or another paper or another project, or we're going to update whatever we're trying to do to write it. So writing plan, very critical. A little bit of the process of writing plan. Once you make up your mind what you're going to do, either the analytical, the descriptive, the comparative, or there are different types of writing plans. I've mentioned 3. That is very common. The next thing is, where do I get the literatures from? Where do I get the literatures for this writing? How do I know that John et al. Did this, or John et al. Did a similar study with mine, or did a diverse study, or did a counter study against mine, right? There are several databases, or again, online, that you could go to see people's scientific works that are similar to your work, or that are similar to what you want to discuss, or that address your objective, or that address your research question, or that seem to cover the area of your therapeutic area. That is what they call the literature review, right? So those common databases where after we do our research, we put it into publication form, we go and we archive it somewhere, we keep it somewhere for future purposes. One of them is PubMed, like we all know. Excuse me, I need water. One of them is PubMed. The other one is Medline. So you could go to Medline and then you put your mesh terms, your keywords. And we've had several videos in this group where we've taught people how to use mesh words, keywords to extract literatures that address your research question or your research objective or your research presentation, or that you want to use in your writing plan. So you go to PubMed, you put your keywords, and it will bring out a list of data that you're going to use to now do your writing, your discussion, or your presentation, or your publication, or what we call the discussion part of the research. And then you begin to filter through, look at what this person said, compare with what you did. If you're doing a comparison writing, if you're doing analytic writing, look at what this person said to explain the findings or the trends that you're seeing. And then you incorporate it into the findings. John et al. In 2023 or in 2022, in their study, study of 5,000 people with depression, discovered that, or notated that, or agreed that, blah, 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 similar to our finding, it's more common in Black. Mary et al. In 1960 first observed trends of depression in Blacks at colorectal cancer screening, blah, blah, blah. That's how you write, okay? And other database online also exist. Database like Embase, like Scopus, Web of Science, CNIAHL, Cochrane is very known. Psychic Info is also very known. So many of them, IEE Sorry about that little break in transmission. I just needed to address some technical problems that we had behind the scene. So back to what I was saying, your research plan, and then your writing plan, you get those data, you analyze them, and you write them. Then you write your conclusion. Your conclusion should be brief, straight to the point. Then we go into other things, other parts, other ways that a team, collaborative team, can work together as contribute to a particular project, right? Someone may be in charge, just one person may just be the person that will write it. It mustn't be everybody that will write introduction, this, that, all those whole stuff, because there's so many other things to do in research. Someone could just simply edit it. Someone could validate it. Someone could rebroaden the concept. Someone could say, hey, I see that these objectives are too narrow. Can we rebroad, or are they too broad? Can we narrow them down? So it's a whole thing. Someone could look at the semantics and the grammar flow. Another person could just edit the graphical presentations in that particular paper. Another person could just look at the graphical presentation and edit it. Another person could just also criticize it, could just be the blinded critic and say, I don't want to know if it's Edward that wrote this paper or another person. My job is to just critique it and make sure that I refine it. Another person could just be responsible for being the one that will answer the questions that will arise, or after questions that will arise. Because when you write a research paper, there's a lot of scientists that jump on it and criticize it and ask questions. That could just be your duty to either decide to say, okay, I'm going to be addressing these things as a team and as we go forward. So these are various ways that you could participate in research. Give me one. Apologies once again for that technical glitch. So these are various ways that you could actually contribute in a research project. And then finally, everybody in that research project must approve that project. It's one of the requirements. In fact, one of the contributions that you do, one of the mandatory contributions that you do is to approve the project. Because, I mean, how can you be in a project that you don't approve, right? So you have to approve the project in the midst of all other roles: conceptualization, analyzing, editing, rewriting, rebroadening the concept, fact-checking, claim, referencing and cross-referencing, editing the grammar flow and the rest. Everybody must approve the project, right? And so that's almost like a tidbit, a summary of how a research project is done. The reason why we decided to talk about this is that it's going to help you understand where you are, what different parts are there, and how you could fit it into whatever you want to do when you're talking about research moving forward in life, either in application, in your workplace, application in your interviews, application in your promotional interviews, or whatever you want. But most importantly, outside give me 1 second. Couple of technical glitches, but permit me my home, and there's a lot of things happening behind the scene that we needed to take care of. So that's like the summary of it all. Above all, remember that whenever you're going for any of these purposes, except you're doing a research interview, you should focus on how this research makes you a good doctor. That's always where you pivot to. Always. When you're done with all the semantics and how you wrote the paper, who you wrote the paper with, and where you wrote the paper, where you got your data from, don't forget to focus on how does this whole, my interest in this niche, where was it? Where is it now? And how do I use it to serve patients and my employees better? That will give you the mark. That's the icing on the top of it. And like one of Dr. Samuel suggested, don't forget to be systematic in your approach, or Dr. Toro, be systematic in your approach, know your title, know the objectives, know the methodology, know the results, right? However, it's impracticably impossible for me to know the objective of the 200 papers that I've written, or the 50 papers, or the 10 papers, as the case may be, that I've written. So, but at least I should have an idea of what it is. They call it a bird's eye view. The least that you should do is to have at least a bird's eye view. Should have a bird's eye view of why this thing was done. What was the overall result I saw? It was positive. How positive it was, I don't know. I can't remember the specifics. And be relaxed to say, oh, I can't remember the specifics. It's been a while I wrote that paper, right? But at least you have an idea that we're looking at colorectal cancer screening in depressive patients, and we saw that it was normal. I mean, as a medical doctor, you should be able to read a manuscript and have a bird's eye view of, oh, what is this thing talking about? Why did they do it? And we try to make most of our projects very easy to deal with, very easy to understand, nothing complex. We looked at HIV in depression, we looked at wellness training in children, we looked at different, very simple, easy things that you could actually talk about. Bird's eye view. Then you have to graduate from the bird's eye view to at least knowing the title of one or two that you've written. And then also knowing the objectives, the methodology. That methodology I've explained, very easy to do. Is that we use data from national database, or we use data from online publications. We could also use data from online publications, right? And then we analyze those data, like in literature review, meta-analysis. We use data from what we got from PubMed, and we analyze those data, and we looked at our objective, and just keep it simple. Pivot straight to why these things interest you, and why you want to drive forward with the whole process. In summary, understanding basic tenets of research, understanding basic statistics, mean, median, and mode is important while walking into these interviews, because you might meet someone that is very interested. Like somebody called me yesterday, had an interview today that a program wants to hire him, and program had an interview with him today, and we prepared yesterday. That's one of the off-cycle sessions, and we're particularly looking for a research-heavy person, or a research-interested person. Went through basic things, and the person went through that interview. I'm happy, came out very successful. You know, they were looking for someone that had research experience to be able to infuse into their team and, revamp their clinical research procedures. And we're all happy for the person, went through the whole preparation, and thank God today, hopefully we're going to see badge, and we're going to announce it later in the future, the successes that we've achieved using clinical research. Even though that clinical research doesn't help much, but you may be one of those 1 in every 10 that will come across a program that actually needs someone who's research interested, but you never know. You might also strike a chord with someone in the faculty. I use myself as an example. When I went to University of Alabama, I made an impression with the faculty, because they were very big on clinical research, and we had like a tea and bread breakfast talking about it. That was all we talked about. It was very exciting. But eventually I didn't match there because I had my choice, and then they called me and they said, oh, I'm sorry, I'll get there, I'll come there in fellowship, and all the other little things that we talked about. So know these things, understand basic regulatory processes. We've talked about regulation in this house, IRBs and whatnot, what are IRBs and how they function. Know different types of clinical research, know what is a case study, know what is a case report, know what is retrospective studies, know what is cross-sectional, know what is phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, basic things. In case the interview or the job prospects or the promotion talks want to go into methodology, not necessarily into the paper that you wrote. They want to understand if you know what type of, is it a case study, is it a case report, you should be able to answer this. And we've dealt with what is a case study, what is a case report, and all these little things that you could also brush up on. Understand research publication processes, where you publish, what journal you published, why you chose those journals. Some journals are very difficult to deal with. I needed to put my idea out there. I needed my idea to make an impact on people. And then I chose this journal that will bring my idea to the platform of the world. And that was why we chose that particular journal, because those questions came to me. Why did you choose Curious? I see you published over 15 Curious. And that was my response. And the person was like, wow, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because New England Journal of Medicine takes a long time to scrutinize your paper. And moreover, I can't even afford it to publish my paper in New England Journal of NEJME or some of the papers might cost me like $4,000, $5,000. Can't afford it. My people cannot afford it, all right, at this particular stage. And many of us are not in institutions that could pay for us. And he asked me, why did you publish in, this is a very beautiful article, why didn't you publish American Heart Association? Because I couldn't afford it. And that's very easy thing. Also things I want you to know the processes of grants, grant processes, grant writing. And if you don't know, it's okay to say that you don't know it. I don't know the processes. I've never done a grant, never written a grant. I don't know how it works. And then lastly, understand the principles or the practice of how to talk and how to present yourself. And that is why we give this platform to so many people, so that you can come in and talk and express yourself and, master the act of talking. Rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, like we heard on a final note from the Oracle of Omaha. Determination is a difference between the person. Determination and application, not just sitting there and criticizing, sitting there in fear, sitting there and listening to people who are going to tell you that you will not be able to do it, sitting there and listening to people who are going to tell you that you're not enough. Meanwhile, you're a full-blown physician, probably practiced before, probably well-to-do, or probably very comfortable in terms of academic or your self-confidence, but because probably you've not crossed a particular line, you suddenly now begin to look at yourself as an ant. Meanwhile, you're a butterfly. Be that butterfly that you want to be. Go out there, smile, and ace this interview. Thank you so much for this presentation. Once again, this is IMG Research Academy. I'm going to stop the recording and take questions, and then we'll be done for the day. Thank you so much. Give me 1 second before I stop my recording.